You've heard the names: Elon Musk, worth around $200 billion, Jeff Bezos, nearly the same, Bernard Arnault, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, the modern titans of wealth, each commanding fortunes that are difficult to even imagine. Their numbers are thrown around casually on social media, and people debate endlessly about who is truly the richest person alive today. But what if I told you that all of them combined would still fall hopelessly short of a man who lived more than 700 years ago? A man whose fortune was so vast, so incomprehensible, that even historians today struggle to calculate it. His name was Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire in the 14th century. And if you measure wealth in relative economic power, Mansa Musa wasn't just a billionaire or a trillionaire. He was the richest human being in history. Born in 1280, Musa Keita Wurse ascended to the throne of Mali in 1312. At the time, the Mali Empire wasn't just another kingdom lost to the margins of history. It was one of the largest and most prosperous empires on earth. Stretching across modern-day Mali, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Niger, Nigeria, and Chad, this was a realm built upon trade, culture, and above all, gold. In fact, during Musa's reign, Mali controlled nearly half of the Old World's gold supply. Think about that for a moment. Half of the world's gold, concentrated under the control of a single ruler. If you ever wonder why Musa's wealth is considered beyond calculation, that fact alone should give you a clue. Gold wasn't just a shiny luxury in the medieval world. It was currency, power, and status. Gold underpinned the economies of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. And Musa had so much of it that he could casually reshape economies simply by spending it. This reality was most famously revealed during one of the most legendary journeys in history, his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. The Hajj, as it is called, is a religious duty for Muslims, and Musa was a devout follower of Islam. But when he undertook this journey, he didn't travel like a normal pilgrim. He set out with an entourage so massive, so extravagant, that it stunned the entire known world. Contemporary accounts describe Musa's caravan as including 60,000 men. Among them were soldiers, heralds, slaves, and officials. There were 12,000 slaves dressed in brocade and Persian silk, each carrying 4 pounds of gold bars. Musa himself rode on horseback, and his personal guards and officials were clothed in the finest fabrics. And then there were the camels, 100 of them, each carrying hundreds of pounds of pure gold dust. Imagine that sight moving slowly across the Sahara, a golden river stretching from the heart of West Africa to the holy city of Mecca. Musa was not merely traveling. He was making a statement to the entire Islamic world that Mali was wealthy, powerful, and culturally sophisticated. But Musa's generosity along the way would cause unintended consequences that still echo in historical memory. When the caravan reached Cairo, Musa began distributing gold freely to the poor, to merchants, and to the ruling elite. He gave gifts so large that the sheer influx of gold destabilized the Egyptian economy. Gold lost value, inflation skyrocketed, prices soared. Some historians suggest the economic ripple effects of Musa's generosity lasted for more than a decade. In modern terms, it would be like one man spending so much money in a single city that the US dollar collapsed in value. That's the kind of scale we're talking about. Word of Musa's wealth spread like wildfire. European cartographers, many of whom had never even heard of Mali before, suddenly placed the empire prominently on world maps. In fact, one of the most famous medieval maps, the Catalan Atlas of 1375, depicts Musa seated on a golden throne, wearing a crown, holding a golden scepter in one hand and a golden orb in the other. To the mapmakers of Europe, Musa was not just a king. He was the embodiment of wealth itself. But Musa was more than just a walking pile of gold. He understood that true legacy wasn't only in riches, but in what one built with them. After returning from his pilgrimage, Musa embarked on a mission to transform Mali into a center of culture, religion, and learning. He commissioned the construction of mosques, libraries, and universities. The most famous of these was the Jinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu, built by the renowned Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq es-Saheli, whom Musa brought back from his travels. Timbuktu, under Musa's patronage, became the intellectual capital of Africa. Scholars, poets, artists, and students flocked to the city. The libraries held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, covering subjects from astronomy to medicine to law. In an age when much of Europe was struggling to emerge from the shadows of the Middle Ages, Timbuktu stood as a beacon of knowledge, and prosperity. The wealth Musa controlled allowed him to do more than fund religious and educational institutions. It also strengthened trade networks. Mali's position in West Africa made it a critical crossroads for commerce. Gold flowed northward to Europe and the Middle East, while salt, ivory, and other goods moved through Mali's markets. Caravans stretched across deserts, and river routes along the Niger carried products and people. Musa understood that wealth was not static. It had to flow, just as gold dust trickled through the hands of merchants and travelers. So how rich was Mansa Musa really? This is where things get complicated. Historians and economists try to measure wealth by translating his gold holdings into modern value. Some estimates suggest Musa's fortune would equal over $400 billion in today's terms. Others argue that if you account for relative economic power, the share of global resources he controlled, the number could climb to the equivalent of $400 trillion or more. To put that in perspective, Elon Musk, at his peak of $200 billion, is wealthy beyond imagination by modern standards. But Mansa Musa's wealth was so vast it's almost meaningless to quantify. He didn't just own a fortune, he commanded an empire's resources on a scale no modern individual can truly match. It's tempting to compare Musa to other historical figures often cited as the richest in history. John D. Rockefeller, the American oil tycoon, is sometimes estimated to have had a net worth of $400 billion in today's dollars. Andrew Carnegie wasn't far behind. Augustus Caesar, the first emperor of Rome, commanded an empire that represented a quarter of the world's GDP at the time. Genghis Khan, though he never hoarded wealth personally, controlled lands stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. Yet even among these names, Musa stands apart. Rockefeller's billions were immense but limited to industry. Caesar and Genghis held political power, but their wealth wasn't liquid. Musa, on the other hand, had direct control over the world's most valuable resource at the time, gold, and he had so much of it that he could bend economies at will. One story often told is how Musa's pilgrimage changed the very perception of Africa. For centuries, European maps often depicted Africa as a distant and mysterious land. But after Musa's display of unimaginable riches, maps began showing the Ali Empire more prominently. This wasn't just geography, it was branding. Musa's wealth literally put his empire on the map. Another fascinating detail comes from the accounts of those who witnessed Musa's generosity. In Cairo, reports suggest that Musa gave away so much gold that it depressed the value of the metal by as much as 25%. Imagine handing out gifts so lavish that you destabilize an entire region's economy. Historians still debate the exact numbers, but the consensus is clear. Musa's pilgrimage wasn't just spiritual, it was economic theater on a global stage. What makes Musa's story even more fascinating is that it isn't just about wealth for wealth's sake. He left behind a cultural and intellectual legacy that outlived his fortune. Timbuktu remained a center of learning long after Musa's reign ended. The mosques and universities he built shaped generations. His story is not just the tale of the richest man ever, but of a leader who understood that wealth could be a tool for influence, faith, and knowledge. And yet, despite all of this, Mansa Musa is rarely mentioned in popular culture. In the Western imagination, the archetypes of wealth are Silicon Valley billionaires, Wall Street moguls, and industrial tycoons. Why is Musa's story less known? Part of it lies in the Eurocentric focus of global history. Africa, despite being the cradle of humanity and home to vast civilizations, was often ignored or minimized in Western narratives. Another reason is the sheer distance of time. Musk and Bezos are alive, Rockefeller and Carnegie are recent enough for photographs. But Musa ruled in the 1300s, in an era preserved mostly through oral tradition and scattered written accounts. His story isn't as easily packaged for modern audiences, but when it is told, it captures imaginations instantly. Think about the numbers again. 400 trillion, enough to buy every Fortune 500 company many times over, enough to purchase entire nations by modern GDP, enough to casually give away gold and break economies. In today's world, we marvel when someone buys a $100 million yacht or sends rockets into space. Musa's wealth was such that if he lived today, he could buy every yacht, every rocket, and still wonder what to do with the change. His empire eventually declined after his death in 1337. Successors struggled to maintain the same level of prosperity and political unity. Trade routes shifted, rival kingdoms rose, and Mali's dominance waned. But for a time, under Musa's reign, Mali stood at the center of the world stage, rich in gold, rich in knowledge, rich in culture. The name of its king echoed across continents. So the next time someone asks you who the richest man in history is, don't say Musk, don't say Bezos, don't even say Rockefeller. Remember the king who turned deserts into rivers of gold, who could humble entire economies with his generosity, who built a city of learning in the sands of Africa. Remember Mansa Musa, the richest human being the world has ever known. And if you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we've got even more incredible stories of wealth, power, and history coming your way.